Welcome in to the Four Verticals Podcast, episode 72 for this Thursday, February 13th, 2025, here from a somewhat rainy Jacksonville, Florida. Very hot today, by the way. A little side note here. When I was going for my walk a little bit earlier, I was outside earlier. Very hot out, almost near 90 here in Jacksonville, but this time next week, not so much. It'll be in the 50s, 60s, I believe, so it'll be a lot cooler. Little preview of, if you will, early summer, late spring, if you will, down here, because of course in Florida there's only 2 seasons, not necessarily the typical 4 seasons, at least weather-wise, but calendar-wise says, or calendar says otherwise. But welcome to the show today. Got a loaded show, a lot of things to cover, a lot of things happening. Got a brand new story from Dennis Dodd about a college football CEO possibly happening or likely happening. How Ohio State making some hires, Matt Patricia, predictions versus a reality, Brave New World, Captain America Brave New World coming out for us in the U.S. Technically it's tomorrow, but really today. Yeah, I got some thoughts on that for sure towards the end of the show. But also, towards the middle of the show, got a question, if you will. We don't have to answer it out loud in the chat or anything if you're listening to us live. But what is the biggest story of 2024? Now that the season's over with, or at least the games are stopped being played, what was the biggest story? Like, what was the biggest story? I got some candidates on here. I won't necessarily tell you what mine was, but I got some candidates here. Choose one, if you will, if in the comment section or in the comment section, wherever you're listening to us on, or just think to yourselves, if you will, as we're going through the show today. Got some living notes here. Of course, the same schedule as usual for this week. Next week, however, we might be doing 3 shows next week, or multiple shows, multiple videos. We'll see. I have some things planned. I'll let you guys know ahead of time, but the usual schedule for the most part next week, but perhaps maybe an additional show. Perhaps Monday, or even Sunday. We'll see. Just throwing it out there. You may have multiple shows next week instead of our typical 2, and then we'll go back to our normal schedule, I think, for the week after. If we have to make changes, I'm not sure yet, but I'll let you guys know. But I might be starting to do a lot more content, I think, next week, and I'll let you guys know for sure. Before we get into dive into the actual topic of the show, if you will, sort of the meat of the show, get some water, and then we'll get going. By the way, thank you for tuning in. If you are tuning in or listening to this on the replay or whatever, and also as we go on as usual, make sure you subscribe, like the stream, follow me on Twitter. Guys, you know the drill. So this story from Dennis Dodd that came out a couple of days ago. I think this was, if I can close that ad there on my computer. Just yesterday, actually about 24 hours ago. So Dennis Dodd at CBS Sports put the story out, sort of a job listing, if you will, that has come up. That has been made public. And that is a chief executive officer for college sports. And from the article from Dennis Dodd, I'm going to read off sort of what the description is, and I'll give you my thoughts on this. That the description, I guess, or the listing that's been kind of floating out there is this candidate will be responsible for the oversight of a multi-billion industry undergoing significant change. The applicant must have extensive athletic, business, legal, and gender equity experience, background in player representation, wealth fund management as preferred. It is important for this candidate to cut all financial ties with their alma mater. This includes wearing the neutral colors at all times. On-camera experience is a must. Send job samples as well, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of something that's been sort of percolating. If you will, that's in the little quote there that Dennis Dodd included in the article. that he put out yesterday. Of course, the title is, if you want to find this, it's the the title that Dennis put is, there will be a college football sports CEO. Who are they? How will they execute? And an impossible task is up in the air. That's the title of the article. So what does this all mean from Dennis? What's Dennis sort of hinting at here? Well, I think Dennis is hinting, and this doesn't even have to be the article itself. I think just in general, there's been this sort of hint, even from like guys like Josh Pate. I think this description that Dennis put in his article sounds awfully a lot like a guy from Nashville, Tennessee, who has a show Monday. Has a show Tuesday and Sundays, Thursdays as well. Sounds a lot like that guy in Nashville, Tennessee. But anyway, whether it's this article by Dennis Dodd or Josh Pate on his show, or even Joel Klatt on his show, the growing sentiment and the sphere here is that there will be sort of like a commissioner figure that will not represent the NCAA, but will be representative of the conferences. I think this article sort of also kind of reinforces that idea. I don't disagree with that. I think that'd be nice to have some sort of a structure as the NCAA versus sort of these legal cases and, varying degree of ineptitude. Because the NCAA, even when folks think the NCAA, you think historically go, oh man, the SMU stuff or the Baylor stuff sort of, or the Penn State stuff. Now the Penn State Baylor stuff's a little bit different. That's like legitimately legal stuff and actually pretty serious, like beyond football. Probably the last time or the only time you've really seen the NCAA being like a very authoritative, fist to the table, and put the spike strips down, get the police helicopters in the air. When that version of the NCAA, that version, I think a lot of folks think of that version being like with SMU back in the 80s with, Sherwood Blunt, the big booster for SMU, and Ron Meyer and Eric Dickerson and Craig James, sort of that era of SMU, the ESPN 30-30, Pony Excess, by the way, great. I believe it's still on Disney Plus. At least last time I checked, it was still on there, so you can watch it on there if you haven't before. I have. I've watched it multiple times. One of my favorite ESPN 30-30s. That one, Trojan War, and the Youngstown Boys. Great documentaries from ESPN, some of the best. I think Pony Excess probably is better than those, but those are by far the three best ones I've ever seen. But that's the way people think of the NCAAs, like that, 1980s SMU Southwest Conference, Sherwood Blunt, paying players, the stories of, Ron Meyer putting his business card and leaving like a $20 bill or $100 bill on the grease board or in the whiteboard in the classroom. The NCAA coming in, and you have like the guy who was giving out the sanctions, literally fainting, and having like a medical issue on the day of the fractions were the sanctions were being announced. Like that's what you imagine the NCAA sort of being, like this all power, all governing body that just controls the sport. They don't anymore. And I think through several court cases, the NIL, the changing landscape, player employment, or at least the players being officially labeled employees, the House case and everything like that. That stuff has sort of declothed, if you will, or dethroned of the NCAA. They're powerless now. There's no control. They have no real authority over any of these colleges or sanctions, because now it's mostly illegal. Like stuff with Tennessee and Nico, like this time last year, which got us to the Virginia case. I believe one of the court cases involving like Tennessee and Virginia. The house money stuff, like all this stuff has sort of stripped the NCAA of any power. And I think the argument and the sentiment has been from guys like Josh Pate, the guys at Cover 3, Joel Klatt, myself, that a governing body outside of the NCAA, which is basically what Dennis describes in his article here, literally the job listing for a chief creative officer in college sports, that's what these conferences, and I think these conference commissioners would much rather have being a governing body. Now, it's not going to happen anytime soon. I will be frank on that. I don't think this is something that's happening tomorrow. But it's interesting how Dennis Dodd put this out, or at least the idea of having a CEO sort of, governing the sport. Not someone from the NCAA, not someone from a government institution, just a CEO type, someone who can manage money, someone who doesn't have any ties to any alma mater, think Josh Pate, or even someone like me. Now, I'm not saying I want to be running for college football commissioner in 2028 or whatever the next election, or whenever there will be an election, but that also qualifies me. I didn't play college football. I played high school sports. I didn't play college football. I don't have any vested interest in, being a part of an actual college football team. Heck, the school I went to doesn't even have a football team. I have basketball in D1. But I have no vested interest, much like Josh Pate. We're not really like guys tied to any real like college football or college football ties in terms of like playing or former player or former coach. We follow the sport. We understand it. We actually talk to, at least in Pate's case and some of these other big guys in the industry, a lot bigger than me, actually follow the sport, talk to the people, understand how the organization runs, and how programs run from my organizational standpoint, recruiting standpoint, nutrition, budget, sort of all the things that a lot of these NFL flybys, they don't understand. They don't like focus on, the nutrition part of things and organizational and structure. And, I always go back to, or have been going back to Pate's interview with John Summerall. That right there is literally something that us sickos and us folks who, again, didn't play college football, but we dig that stuff. We dig the behind the scenes access and, hearing guys like Summerall and guys like, Billy Napier and Matt Campbell and Hugh Freeze and Kellen DeBoer talking about how it is to actually be a head coach and sit down with them, pick their brain, understand how important nutrition is, organization, recruiting, the whole thing about general managers now in college football. That stuff's important. Being able to manage a budget, being able to just have organization and have a governing body that, all of these, the NCAA has their own rules and the conferences have their own little rules. And I think at the moment, at least temporarily, I think the conferences will be sort of like a confederation, if you will, of just, very lax, very mixed bag of, certain rules, and they rule themselves, if you will. I think that might be the direction we're going at the moment. Like, we're a lot closer to that, I think, than we are to a commissioner. But I think eventually there will be a commissioner. There will be some sort of a governing body, sort of like Roger Goodell type, Adam Silver for the NBA. I think those days are coming. Do I think they're coming like immediately, like in the next 2 years? No. Next 10 years, probably. I think in the next 10 to 15 years, I think we will probably see this shift to having a actual commissioner. I think for a little bit it'll be sort of like a confederation, if you will, of these, conferences sort of governing themselves, and there's no all-seeing NCAA power. But then eventually I think we'll get a commissioner who is no ties to NCAA, no ties to any of these schools, but someone who is in the industry, has deep connections, has talked to coaches, is someone who has no bias. Like someone like Josh Pate, sure, he's someone that roots for Iowa State or roots for guys like Billy Napier and Kellen DeBoer, but he's not an open fan. Like he doesn't openly cheer for all these guys as an actual fan and has personal investment. Doesn't say that publicly. But even someone like Joel Klatt. Joel Klatt's a very fair person. Just because, Colorado has Deion Sanders as their head coach, he's not openly cheering for them. He's very, very fair. But I do think a commissioner is possible. I think there will be one at some point, even without this article from Dennis Dodd. I think this article from Dodd, even one of the lawyer, a law professor that he mentions in an article, saying that even someone like Nick Saban, like a Nick Saban type, but it doesn't have to be a former coach. It can be really any of these big media people who follow the sport, actually talk to these coaches and ask them, sort of, again, using Josh Pate's example, or even someone like Joel Klatt. Like, if you even watch these shows, even a show like mine, if I ever interviewed these guys, I would just ask them questions and just sort of ask them, kind of, where do you think the sport is going and sort of where do you want it to go? Like, I want their input on sort of where they want the sport to go. Because I feel like a lot of these decisions are being made, and Josh Pate's echoed this a lot, that the current decisions being made behind the scenes by the TV execs, the big networks. Those are people who do not never play college football or do not care to learn the actual, workings of college football. Like, they don't watch guys like Josh Pate or Joel Klatt, or even heck my show. They just, make it from a corporate standpoint, all they see is like dollars and stuff. And, we're doing this for the dollar, and, we're expanding and doing things that benefit us, but don't benefit the fans or the actual programs or college football in general. They just do it for themselves, and they think this is what the fans want versus not listening to the fans. I think someone like, a guy like Pate, Klatt, myself, probably included in that, could probably do that. Would listen to the fans, would listen to the coaches, would listen to all factors of the sport and get their input. Like having games over in London or in Australia and over in Mexico or whatever may not be for college football. Probably isn't for college football. What would be the result, or what would be the preferred answer for that for college football? Would be having games on campus, road games on campus, fixing the calendar, getting, just the calendar in general is a whole mess. And I think that in general would be something I think a lot of folks would want fixed. And hopefully a commissioner would hopefully fix that. It's not necessarily a guarantee that it would happen, but I I just hope that a CEO position or even just a college football commissioner position doesn't have to be a CEO. Of course, that's a fancy word for this commissioner in this case. I just hope that if this day ever comes and there is a situation where this is coming down the track and it seems like there is, gathering steam for this, just hire the right person or elect the right person. Elect the right person actually cares about college football, understands the working, the behind-the-scenes part of it, not some, TV slopper that only sees things in dollars and pennies and stuff and only looks at, oh, we have to do everything the NFL does. They don't have to. College football can be its own entity. It doesn't have to be NFL junior. It doesn't have to be, NBA junior. It doesn't have to follow that format. It doesn't have to be like that. It can still be its own entity, but doing things creatively, again, emphasizing the on-campus product, regular season product versus just fully focusing on, the postseason and doing what ESPN did, when the playoff first started, having the Who's In campaign, which, by the way, if you notice, over the past 7 years, that's gone away. And rightfully, thank God they stopped doing that. So that's what I want from this. And I think articles like this from Dennis clearly paints that I think there is a growing narrative for a college football CEO or commissioner to at some point take charge here. And I think hopefully that will be the case. So that's my thoughts on Dennis Dodd's little article there. It was not an original topic for the show, by the way, but wanted to touch on that here just a little bit. It's more water here, and then we'll move on. You got a big show, though. We're not done yet. Making sure nothing was breaking on Twitter. All right, so like I mentioned a little bit earlier towards the beginning of the show, I figured, why don't we just pose this question? What was the biggest story in college football in 2024? For the 2024 season, what was the biggest story? If you guys want to follow along with me, think of it in your head while I'm sort of jotting down my candidates. Now, again, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to sit here and specifically mention an exact one or an exact one of these. I'm not going to favor one or the other. Just some ideas here. You guys can think amongst yourselves in the live chat with any listening, or perhaps anyone after on the replay on the audio version. Just something to think about as we kind of move forward here in the segment. So I have about, how many do I have here? About 4, I believe. I was going to do a bit more, but I think 4 is probably sufficient here, so we're not here for an hour. But have a couple of topics here. So the first one, biggest story, I guess candidate 1, Florida State. Florida State, 13-1 the year before. Great year for Mike Norvell. I guess that contract extension, the whole Bama thing. Everything's going well. Sort of, Mike Norvell, Lane Kiffin, both with the Portal Kings. And, Norvell has done a lot of stuff for Florida State up until this year. 10 wins is his second full year. 13 wins his third full year. Of course, first year was COVID, and that's, a unique challenge in itself. But first couple years, and especially those last couple years up until this year for Norvell, things are trending up for him. Not the case this year. Went 2-10. Just sad. I don't know what else to say. Just horrible. Probably one of the biggest. I'm not gonna say not the biggest, but certainly is one of the biggest. Going from one season to the other, just in total record flipping. Right. I guess TCU maybe in 2022 going to 2023. Probably the next biggest thing is I think TCU that year went, 13-2, and then 5-7. But yeah, that I guess LSU, going from 2019 to 2020. But again, that was the COVID year, and that was sort of a strange year in general. Not a technically full year, but that one took me in there. But this one for Florida State is weird, man. It's really weird. Going 13-1, 2-10. They miscalculated in the portal, and that's gonna happen. That's like Josh Pate says, and like the guys on Cover 3 I mentioned, going in the portal is a lot like going to the grocery store. You're not going to find everything you need. Some aisles may be more barren than others, but, man, when you hit really good. But if you don't hit really, it's really bad. And I think Florida State's witnessing that. Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss to a certain extent. They haven't faced it yet, but I wonder how much longer that's more sustainable. Colorado of Dion, it's more unique in terms of him flipping the roster. But Florida State, one of the biggest stories, at least in my opinion, just how fast things got bad for them. Just the grossness. I mean, your only 2 wins were what, Charleston, Southern, and you defeated the Calgary Rhythm, so you did that. Losing to Georgia Tech week 1 or week 0, losing to Boston College, not to mention the work chant getting banned. The stadium was under construction. Literally looked like it was like half destroyed. You also have the stuff with your recruiting class is falling apart. You have to fire both your coordinators. You bring in Gus Malzahn, and it's as your OC, by the way, the sitting head coach of UCF. So, Florida State going 2-10. One of the biggest stories. Ryan Day, the hot seat stuff, winning a national title despite that. I've already gave my thoughts on that. That's another big story. I think that's sort of one that would probably, fit if you're to do like the ranking of all these. I'll probably number 1. I don't know for me yet, but I'll definitely be up there. Kellen DeBoer taking over for Alabama. Definitely one of the biggest stories, I think, at least in the spring and winter cycle and summer. Definitely a bigger highlight. Him taking over from Nick Saban, the portal exodus, and Kellen DeBoer and them initially having on their hands tied behind their back, not able to get players back initially or be able to keep players. They got back Hayden Proctor. Started off good for them, beating Georgia, in turn around losing to Dago Pavia and Vanderbilt, losing to Tennessee, losing to Oklahoma the way you did. Just the up and down, and the offense being inconsistent week in to week out, largely due to Jalen Monroe being very inconsistent. But that whole story with Kellen DeBoer, just even Nick Saban just retiring in general, if you were to do like the big picture for the year of 2024, that one's would probably be number 1 for me, or at least very close. But Kellen DeBoer taking over, and like I mentioned before, I'm not down on Kellen DeBoer at all. I still think he's the right guy for the job. I think this year is what it's going to be. We'll see what they do at the quarterback position, whether it's Austin Mack or the freshman. Of course, they have a lot of time, of course, for spring coming up for them. We'll see. But I think Kellen DeBoer's going to be fine. This year is what it's going to be. They've been recruiting very well. I think 2026 is probably going to be the year where you would reasonably expect them to be a team that will probably be in the playoffs and at least be a team reasonably in contention for a championship. But I think Kellen DeBoer's going to be a rock star there. First year, it was tough. Bama's is actually one of their tougher schedules, and this year it's kind of the same. The teams, at least the SEC, are the same, just you flip the locations. So that one, definitely a big story. This one also a big story as well. Kind of being overshadowed by, of course, like the Ryan Day stuff a little bit and sort of the Kellen DeBoer stuff. And I guess another one here I can add in was Miami missing out on the playoffs and a bit of disappointing end of the season for Mario Cristobal and company, and firing Lance Gittering and bringing in a new coordinator. But this next one, kind of getting overshadowed a little bit, was Travis Hunter in Colorado. And look, I was wrong on Colorado. I was wrong on them. I didn't like some of the stuff that Deion was bringing. Bringing in Pat Shurmur, who was a horrible head coach in the NFL, letting go Sean Lewis, who I thought was doing just fine. I don't understand what the changes made. I still don't know why that was made. I thought the schedule in the Big 12 and then adjusting to that was going to be difficult. The offensive line issues were still a concern. They proved me wrong. Shadorn proved me wrong, and Travis Hunter winning the Heisman. Great for him. Great story. If you know his personal story of his dad, him in prison and stuff, and just a horrible situation for him. Congrats to Deion and them. A great season for them. Of course, Travis and Shadorn move on to the NFL. But I think for just looking at what Deion has done there, again, look, I had doubts. I had severe doubts about what Deion was able to do. At least getting done this quickly. I'll have to admit, I was wrong. This is pretty incredible to see. Even last year, I know a lot of folks were upset last year, but I have to understand last year, and at least talking about 2023, still an improvement, right? 4 wins from, what was it, 1 win? It's still pretty good in win improvement. I know some folks, especially the talking heads, would say, "Oh man, this is embarrassing and wrong and everything." Look, I'm not getting into other stuff about the head coaches who have vendettas against Deion. I'm not going to talk about that here, but just what they were able to do this year in the new conference, just a couple games away from actually being in Dallas for Big 12 championship game. That's pretty incredible, man. That's really good stuff. And I think as you're going to see now with Caden Salter coming in at quarterback, year 2 with Pat Shurmur being there. We have Warren Sapp still there on the D-line coach, and also Marshall Faulk apparently joining the staff there as well. So another former Hall of Famer well, not former, because he's not been stripped or anything, but of the Hall of Fame title. But another Hall of Famer, former NFL player on there. I'd be interested to see. I'm interested to see how they'll do this season. But those are probably your four, at least in my opinion, the top four stories. I think interesting enough, the Colorado one, you really haven't mentioned that much. I know Cover 3 did their version of this yesterday. I don't think they mentioned Colorado that much. I think they did a little bit, but that one would certainly be up there. I think just the way people were looking at it, including me, how wrong we were, and how Dion and company just went to work, put their head down, got to work, started out rough with the Nebraska game, but really after that, they turned it on, and they really got things going there towards the middle and later half of the season. Then, of course, the Kansas game happens, and everything have their hopes and dreams of making it to Dallas kind of ended a little bit. But I think the Colorado Travis Hunter thing and him actually winning the Heisman kind of is going to get overshadowed a little bit. In fact, they even won 9 games too. That's going to get. I think a lot of folks are going to forget that. I think that's understandable, right? Just with the 12-team playoff being implemented, which that's another thing we could have added in here too. But that's the 4 I would have had if I were, or at least the 4 I have in terms of which ones are probably the top stories in college football. The least I would have considered if you were doing like an exhaustive list or not. So again, just to recap this as we sort of move on here. Florida State going 10-2, Ryan Day winning a national championship despite the hot seat stuff. Came on the board taking over for Nick Saban. And Travis Hunter in Colorado. I think a solid list. Could have had some more stuff on here. Could have, USC, for example, could have been number 1. We could have very easily added in. So, very interesting stuff there. So I'm going to do, that's it for that segment. I'm going to get some water, sort of regrouping, make sure the voice is going smoothly. Also making sure you guys can hear me as well. That's another thing that I also need to check on. Then we'll move on to the next segment here, which is some Ohio State coaching staff news. And so real quick, going to check here, here's some feedback, and apologies for that. Then I'll get some water and we'll should be ready to go. So apologies for that. Then okay, guys, can't hear me, so I'm going to get some water, and then we should be ready to continue. Actually, I'm going to make sure I actually have the teams we are actually talking about here on the predictions versus reality. So we'll quick here, I'm actually add these into the show notes. So stand by. I believe you're doing, yes. How about that? Georgia and Florida on predictions versus reality. That should be fun, right? Definitely not controversial at all. Okay. So Ohio State hires Matt Patricia as the defensive coordinator, replacing Jim Knowles, who was at Penn State. Not much to really say here about the hire. I mean, resume-wise, Matt Patricia, very well-respected defensive coach, if you will. He was head coach of the Lions for a little bit. Was the Patriots offensive coordinator for a little bit. So definitely a weird journey. I don't believe Patricia has that much NFL, or he has obviously a lot of NFL experience. I don't know if he has a lot of college, though. I don't think he does. He was at Syracuse early on. But, mostly it's been, tied to Bill Belichick, Lions head coach for a couple of years. Was at the Eagles recently, and now he's at Ohio State as the supposed defensive coordinator. I don't think it's been made official yet, but it's at this point it's probably going to be intimate that he is going to be hired here. In terms of the actual grade for the hire and how I feel about it, I mean, sure, I guess if you were to go the Denny Cannell route, C+, I guess. I don't know how it's going to work out. I would say, in terms of his NFL experience and him being able to evaluate talent that way, it's not the same, which is sort of the misconception a lot of these folks have, especially with the NFL types who think, oh, yeah, a college football program hiring a former NFL coach, assistant or not. Oh, yeah, that should work out right because the guy coached the NFL. He knows how to, he knows how to evaluate talent. He doesn't know how to evaluate talent in high school. Like, do these any of these high school or any of these NFL coaches or assistant coaches, whatever, do they actually know how to properly scout high school recruits? Do they know how to evaluate talent that way? Because getting talent from the draft they're already made. They're pre-made product, right? That's pre-made from college. They've had coaching in college from all these programs, Ohio State, Clemson, Oregon, you name it. They're already ready-made products. So those guys, for the longest time, like guys like Belichick, Herm Edwards, for example, a lot of these guys who have had NFL experience, they only know how to evaluate talent via the draft, ready-made products, or ready-made products or ready-made players who've had a number of years of experience via free agency, which is not the same as transfer portal or recruiting. Because in transfer portal, you're getting a whole bunch of different guys, right? Either grad players, juniors, seniors, guys who are freshmen or redshirt freshmen. Like a lot of these guys are not polished, finished results yet. The guys who are going to the draft are mostly ready to go. You're ready to go players. Usually, if you're drafting, especially the first round, somewhat second round, then after that kind of falls off in terms of, guys are immediately going to start. But that's different than actually evaluating guys from high school, guys from junior college, or guys in the transfer portal. It's a lot different. You also have to manage more things. You don't have like a traditional general manager or owner. You're the head man. You have that AD above you and the president. So hopefully someone like Patricia can at least help evaluate the talent. You can actually evaluate talent in high school. It's going to be difficult. I'm sure it's going to be a definitely learning curve for him. But in terms of an actual play caller, be able to call a defense, I have no questions about that. I'm sure he's good at what he does. But I just question whether or not these guys like Belichick and, guys in the past like Herm Edwards, can these guys actually evaluate high school talent properly? It's not the same as drafting guys. A lot of it's the big sort of one of the big lies, if you will. If you're going full Josh Pate here, that's one of the big lies. One of the big lies in college football is you're not which record says you are, and the other one is evaluating NFL talent in the draft or in free agency. It's not the same as evaluating high school talent or portal talent. It's not the same. It's completely different. And I think this is a lie that a lot of folks seem to forget a little bit, that it's not the same thing. Again, you have when you're recruiting someone and evaluating high school talent, from what I've heard from different shows and talking to certain people, some of these kids, of course, it's academic stuff or character flaws. Like some of these, that's a big thing too. Of a lot of these recruiting guys, experts in the industry, they know that a lot of these schools, smaller in stature schools, like smaller P4 schools or G5 teams, they get the 4-star guys or somehow the 5-star guy. Some of the reasons why they're going at these 5-star guys are going to these smaller P4 or G5 teams. They're not going there because they are necessarily wanted there. They're going there because the schools that they were looking to get into, the big boys, saw character flaws or maybe some issues that they could potentially perkle up. That's a concern. And can you actually properly evaluate that? Can you, again, properly evaluate guys out of high school who are not ready-made products? Yes, they're going to make mistakes. We've seen it a lot with freshmen. For example, this last recruiting class with the receivers, like guys like Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith. Those guys are pretty rare, and at least rare enough to have the success they had this year. Like someone like Cam Coleman at Auburn, kind of what you would expect. Some struggles here and there, and Cam eventually got going, but he didn't necessarily reach the highs like a Jeremiah Smith did with winning a national championship, or even Ryan Williams having, a great season for a kid who last fall was not an adult yet. Now he is, thankfully. You don't have to hear that from the broadcast anymore. They'll start making jokes about it, but that's going to happen. Have guys make mistakes, players who are still relatively young. Again, you're dealing with going from guys who are at least, late 20s, early 30s to guys who are like 18 to 17-year-olds. Like, that's not easy. I don't know if Matt Patricia is ready for that. Certainly he's with a very smart group of people. Guys like, Brian Hartline, Larry Johnson, the defensive line coach up there, has been there for a long time. Been there, as long as I've been alive. And a guy like Ryan Dick, guys who've been experienced with coaching college kids and have really good experience in the college football landscape. They should be able to help him there. Again, as a play caller, I'm not worried about Matt Patricia as a play caller. I think he'll be fine, at least reasonably okay. I just worry about, can he actually properly evaluate talent and actually, go for the process of actually recruiting properly, getting to know these guys, understanding which guys have certain character flaws. Just because they're a 5-star doesn't mean they're going to necessarily be the brightest person in the room or the most smartest guy in the room. Again, these are still 18, 24-year-old kids. Like, they're not fully developed yet. They're not ready-made products. So I don't want, hearing, guys like Matt Patricia or guys like Bill Belichick going, or even guys like, Joe Lombardi of the GM, I believe that's his name, at North Carolina, going, oh, man, these guys absolutely suck on the college level. Well, what the hell, dude? They're freaking 24 to 18-year-olds. They're not finished products yet. Like, what do you expect them to do? Like they're not like, the next, like, Warren Sapp or the next Eric Dickerson or the next, like, this guy or the next. Like, they're still 18, 24-year-old kids. Let them grow a little bit. I don't want to hear that part. Again, as a play caller, as someone who understands how to call a defense, I'm not worried about that from Matt Patricia. I just worry, again, can he properly evaluate, recruit, and actually coach these kids? And it's since they're not coaching, rookies in the NFL or veteran guys. It's not the same thing. So I just hope everyone understands that, so no one's getting mad when, Caleb Downs misses a tackle versus Oregon, or misses a tackle versus USC or Iowa or whoever, or Penn State. I don't want to see Matt Patricia getting mad on the sidelines and saying, this guy's stupid and an idiot. Like, this is the NFL, dude. This is college football. Hopefully you understand that. So, again, as a coordinator and somebody who can call plays, I'm not worried about it. I'm just worried about, can he actually recruit? Can he actually treat these guys like they are? Like they're adults, young adults, not necessarily veterans in the NFL. Totally different universes and worlds. So, again, that's one of the other big lies. I think people think that, recruiting in college football and drafting players and free agency in the NFL is the same thing. It's not. So if you have experience doing that, doesn't necessarily mean you have the spirit. You are ready to deal with recruiting or dealing with the transfer portal. I know you might, at least with the budget stuff and being able to handle the money side, you may have experience doing that. It may help you a little bit. But again, it's really focused on understanding which guys are good characters, which guys aren't going to be, demons in the locker room, or which guys are going to develop faster, or which guys are maybe going to develop a little bit slower. Well, that's kind of important. And also not like getting all out and frustrated when the kid's not developing fast as we want to. Well, the kid's still developing. This isn't, college football 25. You can go edit a custom made or a AI generator recruit and make the guy 100 overall. Like you can't do that in real life. Okay, you can't just reprogram an 18, 20-year-old kid. You can't do that. So hopefully they understand that. Hopefully everyone else understands that recruiting in the NFL or recruiting in college football is not the same as drafting players in the NFL or signing free agents in the NFL. Not the same thing. Just hope we understand that. But yeah, again, as an actual hire, don't mind it in terms of an actual football coach. But just other stuff I have some questions about. Just some questions, not saying the guy's an idiot. I'm not saying the guy's stupid or anything. I'm saying I have some questions about how he's going to translate. Because again, it's a little different world here, but as a coordinator, totally fine with it. Just as long as he's not calling the offensive side of the football, I think we're okay. I guess we're deep enough in the show. So, first of all, welcome to the show. Hope you guys are enjoying the product. A couple things to ask you, and then we'll move on to the last two topics here. Make sure you're subscribed. I know there's about 4 of you out there, and 4 of you about watch. That's the average we get on this show. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you are. If you haven't, you think you are, doesn't matter. Just double check. Make sure you're subscribed. Even if you are, just make sure you double check. And if you want the notification bell turned on, that's up to you. It's not a requirement. Just a recommendation. You don't have to. I don't personally do it because I don't want my phone blowing up with 50 notifications that my favorite YouTuber has uploaded a video. I can check on my own later. Also subscribe to the podcast feed on Spotify. We post audio version on there exclusively, not the live stream version. If you want the live version, you have to be here live. We will, of course, have the audio version available at some point in the near future, but either today or tomorrow. But that's important. So make sure you're subscribed to both platforms here. And also follow me on Twitter as well, @birds_pod. Last college football segment, then we'll have Captain America Brave New World. Predictions versus reality. So this is a new segment we did. We started doing a couple of weeks ago, moving right along, just detailing our list, sort of how we did versus our preseason, summer expectations, our record prediction segments, our projections versus how the teams did in real life. So that's predictions versus reality. It's just looking back at what the season was and just seeing what we got right, what we got wrong. What was our projections sort of in the vein of how the teams are going to perform. Some have been better than others for the most part. But I think we've been fairly good on some of these, I think. Some of these are actually quite good. In terms of their regular season projections only, this is kind of what we're dealing with here. And some of these are actually quite spot on, actually, believe it or not. Both of these today were quite spot on. That being Florida and Georgia. Georgia, our best case scenario for them, they're up first year because they were the better team, if you will. Best case scenario was 11-1. That didn't happen. 9-3 was the worst case scenario. Kind of almost happened. Most reasonable we put was 10-2. Voila, their regular season record, 10-2. Golf clap for us. We got that right. So I'm not gonna rehash what I said over the last summer, but there was some concerns, especially the running back room wasn't that good. They said the same oomph that it has in the past couple years, and this year the same thing. They were not good to run the ball last year. Carson Beck did not foresee that happening with him turning the ball over that much. Defensively, not the same step they had in the past years. Obviously, the schedule's a lot tougher or harder than it has been in recent years because no more divisions now, thank God. But I thought 10-2 was pretty reasonable. Again, given Bama was on the schedule on the road, it'd be tough. Doesn't matter who the coach was. Texas on the road. Clemson, even beginning of the year. And even, going back to that Clemson game, and I smartly kind of thought this, I kind of felt like Clemson defensively matched up pretty well, Georgia. And I was sort of right for about a quarter and 5 minutes. First quarter and 5 minutes into the second quarter, I believe, and then things started to unravel a little bit as I was watching it at a local bar here in Jacksonville. But so I was somewhat right about how we had Georgia projected, and I think we kind of got what we thought. Again, the best case scenario I thought 11-1, in some alternate universe that happened, or perhaps 9-3 happened. But and what happened in our lifetime, in this current timeline, if you will, if you want to go, full Doctor Strange here, the result we got was 10-2, and that's what I thought. Based on the schedule, I thought there were some deficiencies both on the defensive line, running back room, again, the whole quarterback performance thing. I didn't think that was going to happen, so that was a bit of a shock to me. But I think we got what we had was 10-2, and that was good enough to get in the playoff. I mean, that was, of course, they won the SEC championship game. They lost in the second round in the New Year's Six bowl game. But I think 10-2 for Georgia with this schedule, I would be kind of happy with it. Now, grant you, if this was, the old SEC East, then that's a whole different conversation. Because, again, you are not what your record says you are. Your record is based off of what your schedule is, how hard it is. And with Georgia's schedule, it was a fairly tough schedule compared to past years. And it reflected that. And look, they were an overtime dumb decision away from, or a bad decision away from being 9-3 against Georgia Tech. So, again, we were kind of spot on here with Georgia a little bit. Well, not just a little bit, a lot. So we have next year, too. And they open up with, who do they open up with, actually? I don't recall who they actually open up next year, week 1. I should know this, but I don't. So, excuse me for not knowing that. But I think with Clemson this year, I believe they have another neutral site, if I recall correctly. Let's see here, Georgia. No, they do not have a big non-conference game. So that's interesting. So they have. I have not looked at this that much. So they have Marshall, G5 team. They have FCS. They have Charlotte in November, and then they have Georgia Tech, and that is a neutral site in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Why it's not at Bobby Dodd Stadium, that's perfectly good enough, but whatever. That's an old different discussion for a different show or a different episode. That kind of infuriates me. I totally forgot this is a thing. So, yes, they do have a neutral site game. They have 2 of them this year. The last one I just mentioned, and they have the last game here in Jacksonville, at least for a couple years, and we'll be back because the Jackson is being renovated or actually being destroyed and being rebuilt. But the first 2, so they have G5 FCS, and then they have at Tennessee and then Bama. That's pretty tough. That's a tough first month to go for Georgia, and I think it makes sense why they didn't schedule a big non-conference game. So it kind of makes sense here. But yeah, no big. Didn't they? I thought they did have a big game schedule. I don't know. Maybe they did and they canceled it. I don't remember. I know a couple years ago they did have that case where they had Oklahoma on the schedule and had to move it around because for some reason that makes sense. And even though Bama didn't have to cancel a game versus Texas, I don't know why, but whatever. But yeah, this year no real big non-conference game for Georgia except for Georgia Tech in the freaking Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But anyway, yeah, tough beginning of the schedule. I didn't realize that Tennessee and Bama were that early in the season. Kind of rare there. How about that? So that's Georgia. I mean, nailed them pretty much perfectly. Same with Florida. Their best case scenario for Florida, 9-3. I feel like with the talent they had there with DJ Lagway or whoever, Rammer, who I thought somewhat underrated as a quarterback, there was an avenue where I thought 9-3 was actually kind of the best case scenario here. As crazy as that is, I don't think I might actually out off here based on the power rating situation as it turned out with DJ Lagway. Actually, they were starting at quarterback. Florida was a top 25 power rating team. Again, I know for some folks, power rating's a little bit too big for them. Doesn't make sense to them. Makes sense to me. Perfectly fine of them being a top 25 team and listing them in power ratings. So 9-3, totally fine with. Worst case scenario was 1-11. Thankfully, that didn't happen. So I'm kind of glad we kind of avoided the major disaster because that's a very tough schedule. I mean, you had one game that was not a team that was a part of a Power Four conference. Like Florida was the only team in major college football that had that issue. They had Miami in the non-con, Florida State as usual. They had UCF, who at the time when they scheduled this was at the time they scheduled that was a G5 team, not anymore in the P4. So they only had one non-P4 game last year. So that's why that 11-1 was there. It's very dramatic sort of record projection. But based on that, how tough that schedule was, in fact, they only had one non-P4 game. I said that was tough to swallow. And kind of hard to believe that was actually a record projection I made, but I think it was pretty appropriate. This year, I think it's a little bit different. I don't have UCF this year. But the most reasonable I chose was 7-5, sort of in the middle. Not the best case, not the doomsday scenario, but I felt like there were some games on there, like the Ole Miss game late in the year, LSU, Kentucky, South Carolina, at least teams like that, Florida State, even to a certain extent towards the end of the year, Mississippi State too. Kind of feel like there was an avenue where they could, potentially get the 7 wins, and they did. They finished 7-5. They finished 8-5 with a bowl win, and Bill Napier and company, one of the hottest teams. Like them and Baylor are probably them, Baylor, and then Arizona State last year, the two hottest teams in the country. I guess if you want to throw in Notre Dame too, that's pretty incredible. And a lot of both Florida and, if I recall correctly, Baylor are returning a lot of talent. Now, defensively, it's a little bit different for Baylor because they are losing some guys, but Auburn comes to town for Baylor week 1. If I'm Auburn, be careful. Just be careful. I know that's a long ways to go until we start predicting those games. I'm just saying, just be careful. That's I think Auburn, right now is a small favorite according to FanDuel. I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if Baylor ends up being the favorite. Rightfully so. I think they're just a better offense right now in terms of looking ahead. But anyway, in terms of Florida, we got this pretty much correct. And again, from a power rating standpoint, if you were to plug in DJ Lagway and not having this slow start, so if you were to start over, if you will, if you were to go into our branch timeline, I kind of feel like a 9-3 season is kind of reasonable here. I don't think it's too crazy to think that. Now, 1-11 scenario, let's sort of avoid that, even though that there is a world where that could have happened. Or even 5-7, 6-6 or whatever. But 7-5, 8-5, the final record of the bowl win, pretty good. How about that? Everyone was acting like Bill Napier was some idiot and some stupid dumb fart. But he ended up pulling it together, and now they're one of the hottest teams going to. Now, grant you, it's a little bit different because you have spring, and have to account for possible injuries and transfers and whatnot. But all things considered here, Florida, if I were to, do a listing of top 25 teams, I would do those old, well, not old, but the way too early top 25s. Florida, to me, would be easily in the top 25. That's probably as high as they would go based on, again, their schedule. And it's pretty tough again, especially with interconference. But Florida's be really good next year. And I think, I know folks personally, at least in my life, have been telling me, well, if they're so good, they should win the national championship and go win the SEC. No one's saying that. No one's predicting, even right now, Florida to be a national championship contender or an SEC contender. They're not probably going to. Could they be a 9-3 team, much like how I had them this year as the best case scenario? Yeah, it's not impossible, especially with number 5 at quarterback. Or whatever his number 2. Yeah, number 2 at quarterback, DJ. Hey, anything's possible with him. And someone like him who's high variance, high talent, 4 or 5 star guy. Hey, like that is sort of the crux here of whether or not he is. If he ends up being as good as we think he's going to be, Lagway, that is going to do dividends for them a lot. In terms of, again, his talent, his potential. A lot of folks were worried about, potential, because again, it was him and Florida A&M last year or a couple years ago, recruiting class, people were theorizing already. Hey, if things go south, could DJ transfer? Maybe that opens up the door for him to go to A&M with Mike Elko. That didn't happen. He's still there. Their schedule next year, so I look sort of looking ahead a little bit. Not doing a full prediction here. We'll do that after probably Memorial Day. So they get LIU. That's an FCS team. I think that's in Brooklyn, I believe. So Northeast team, I believe, if I recall correctly. So they get them at Miami. Then they get Florida State, and then they get South Florida. Be careful. That's number one, much like Auburn Baylor. Be careful. South Florida, Alex Glesh and company, that's a very good G5 program. Again, what Alex Glesh has done there, turn that thing around from what Jeff Scott and Charlie Strong had it, where it was going the wrong direction and one of the worst teams in FBS, to now a pretty good, fairly decent to pretty good G5 team. Cough, clap. So that's, just be careful. Then it gets real in a hurry with LSU and Miami back-to-back weeks. And they're both on the road, too. So have fun. And again, everyone's, expectations. But I see the schedule, and it's LSU, Miami, Texas A&M, all basically in a row, essentially. You have a bye week in between A&M and Texas and Miami. But that's really tough. Like, Florida could very easily start, 2-4. That's not out there on a possibility here. And everyone's be like, they're all Bill Neighbor needs to be fired. He's a stupid idiot. Okay, I get it. Expectations. But I'm just telling you, you are not what record says you are. I know people personally, burp there, personally tell me that, so you don't care about expectations. You don't care about, Florida should be SEC champion contender. But their schedule's like one of the toughest in the country. Like, what do we want them to do? Go 12-0 and beat every single team 1,000-0? Like, unless you can edit players like you can in College Football 25, the recruits, and you can force the wins, I don't see a path for them to go 12-0 here. That's just putting it out there. A spoiler for my record projections in the summer. Don't see that happening unless something drastically changes and they go all in the portal, the spring transfer window. Don't see that happening. There's no way of this type of schedule, especially in the first 6 or so weeks. I'm like, man, this is tough. The first 7 weeks there again. LSU, Miami, Texas A&M. 3 of those are on the road. One of them's at home. Oh man, the schedule here for Florida is brutal, man. And I thought last year was horrible and a little bit better because you don't have now you have 2 non P4 teams, but still that's pretty brutal, man. So again, I get it. Expectations. I've got to fire someone after one loss or whatever. It's like, okay, just telling you I don't think that's how it works. But then again, I get told it's a new day, Josh. It's a new day. Okay, new day, whatever. I just from what I've heard, some of these coaches and listening to guys like Josh Plain, actually sitting down with these guys and listening to those interviews, I just have even more higher appreciation for guys like Bo Napier, Summerall, even guys like Deion Sanders. It's like, man, you guys are really hair triggered and just want to run these guys out of town as soon as possible. But I get it. It's for the business. And look, for sure in schools like a Maryland, Mississippi State, I get it. It's you got to start the fan excitement. You got to sell tickets. But some of these bigger programs, and I just sometimes find it hard to believe that's actually how some of these NFL types and some of these talking heads on TV actually think that way. And just thinking that after one game you should be fired. Like you deserve to be sent to Gitmo basically and go down and be sitting there and just suffer. But then again, I get told it's all about expectations. Speaking of expectations, I'm actually going to get some more water here, and then we'll move on to even more very sad topic here to end the show, but we'll get through it. So, boy, this is gonna be toxic. So, Captain America: Brave New World is out internationally. It's actively. You can literally go to a theater, and I'm not going today. I'm doing my show. I will eventually. I'll give you guys my thoughts on it, but it's out there. You can go watch it. I'm sure a lot of you guys are probably watching it, despite the fact it has a 51% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That's great, right? That should give you some confidence. So this movie's had a weird history of me and really the whole fan base, right? It's of course, it spurns off of, Falcon Winter Soldier. The show is what it was. I thought it started out good. and then every episode just kind of got worse. The finale, frankly, was pretty boring. It's like, just want to fall asleep. Look, I have nothing against Anthony Mackie. I have nothing against Harrison Ford. I have nothing against, any of the cast or anything. The show or the movie. There are some general concerns here. Now that show went the way it went after the first episode or whatever, and it just got worse and worse. And this movie gets announced. It gets leaked out. Well, not leaked. It gets announced via the trades, and then, by the time Comic-Con comes around that summer, they officially announce it. And I was like, okay, hopefully, they can, bigger budget, they can do some different stuff. Hopefully the movie will sell me better with Sam being Captain America versus the actual show. But then the reshoot stuff starts happening, and the leaks start coming out, and guys like Jeff Snyder who start reporting, hey, there's some, the test screenings aren't going so well, and they're having to, literally reshoot the movie. And then they bring in Giancarlo Esposito, and that solves everything, and apparently he's brilliant in the movie. Then you start having, Harrison Ford as the Red Hulk, and look, I'm Harrison Ford's one of my favorite actors of all time. He's great, Indiana Jones, Han Solo, Blade Runner. So he's an all-time favorite actor, but it's like, okay, the only reason why this movie's getting a lot of traction now, it's getting how it may make decent enough money, is because they're putting in Red Hulk and like all of the marketing material. He's like brilliant in the movie, apparently. He's like, that's not really a spoiler. I think it was kind of obvious based on the leaks and based on what the movie was going to be originally, I guess, that it was mostly going to be focused on Sam Wilson's Captain America. Does that sell ticket numbers? No. Probably not. I think nothing against Anthony Mackie. I just don't know if that character and his popularity, I just don't know if it would be getting the same buzz if, Red Hulk was in the movie. But he's barely in it, though. He's in the marketing. They're doing a good job of that. At least of the TV spots, of the marketing in terms of the clip releasing. We talked about that last week. That was garbage. That was completely mishandled. But just from the name changing, the controversy one of the characters is like an Israeli character who's a mutant in the comics. I'm not touching that here. If you want to go to CNN or any of those other political networks and go there for that, I'm not touching that here. But just in general, just the way this movie was being made, the title changes, even the initial title everyone was kind of like, you're really doing that? This has ties to the whole political conspiracy theories and stuff. The reshoots of this movie, the reporting guys like Jeff Snyder, who again, I think is extremely credible. The guy knows what he's doing. I know a lot of folks don't like him. Like, the guy is literally just doing his job, and he's pretty good at doing it. I mean, you're all laughing at him. He was like, he was talking about the reshoots and saying this movie was a mess and same with the Marvels, and it turns out he was right. Seems like he was wrong with this one too. So that's 2 for 2 for Jeff Snyder, and I have a lot of respect for him. And I'm sure, actually, him and John Rocco, who do their show every Thursday, they're on tonight, and I'm sure we'll get some tea from him tonight as well. Just probably reaffirming everything he's been hearing, and I'm sure everything he's been hearing about the film, the reactions, definitely lines up with his reporting and how they had to do several reshoots because those test audience reactions were not good, and it seems like they made, I'm using an old quote here from, I believe it's from Brandon Marcello, I believe, a couple years ago, from a other reporter talking about Arkansas football, but the quote is, you basically make something out of you get told, go make something out of a porta potty or I don't know, I guess go fix a porta potty and go make something out of it. I guess that's the best analogy I can use for this. It's basically you're being told, hey, go fix up this old porta potty over here, and you have to make it look beautiful and stuff, make it look presentable. That's this movie. I don't have much joy in saying that, and based on production stuff and some of the point from Jeff Snyder, that was the feeling I was getting. But then you get the marketing stuff, and then you start to hear, guys like Robert Meyer Burnett, who a buddy of his who saw the movie in early screenings, said, hey, it's fairly decent, had some fun with it. And even early reactions yesterday when I was watching with Joshua at the End of Nerds, it's like, okay, I can, sure, the marketing stuff was pretty much garbage for this movie, but, hey, at least the reviews are somewhat positive here. It looks fairly decent. Yeah, I don't expect the Rotten Tomatoes score to be, in the 70s, maybe low 60s at the worst, mid 70s. It's doable, better. But then it starts out in the 40s, and then it goes up a little bit. It's like, we're doing this again. Here's what I'll mention this on Twitter, and I guess I'll just go into this little spiel here. The current state of Marvel, and I've always thought, I may have mentioned this time last year. I may have already done a segment on this back last summer, but it's probably appropriate to bring it back up now. I've always felt like the current state of Marvel right now, from like 2020 onward, is very much so not only congruent, but also very similar to Clemson football. Clemson football and Marvel back in the early 2010s, throughout that basically the whole decade, it was pretty dominant. You had Marvel with major hits, Civil War, Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, all 4 of the Avengers movies, just Black Panther, the third or the fourth Thor movie, Ragnarok, just a lot of major hits, multi-billion-dollar movies, great critical ratings from the audience. Also the Spider-Man movies too, though that's a Sony Marvel collaboration, but I guess they kind of fit in here too. Just a great streak of success. And Clemson the same way. Clemson on the football field, Dabo Swinney, from 2011 with Taj Boyd, who gets forgotten because, with Sean and Trevor, just ringing off multiple 10-win seasons and either playoff contention or in contention during the BCS era. It was just a great success for both the Marvel franchise and Clemson football. And I think what happens here, and both ironically following very similar timelines here in track, is that once the decade ended after 2019, everything started to change. The entering what Josh Pate said in a little video, and kind of entering phase 2, if you will, in quotes. Both for Marvel and for Clemson, not Marvel literally because they're in phase 4 by then, but phase 2 in terms of you're no longer the underdog. You're no longer doubted. Like Marvel, up to around 2008, before that, they were sort of doubted. They were like, the silly studio, and DC had been the superior studio, and same with Sony and Fox, how they were able to get Spider-Man, X-Men, and somewhat the Batman films, especially with the Nolan movies with WB. But Marvel was always sort of the lesser studio. You had like the Ang Lee Hulk film, and you have the old stupid Captain America movies back in like the 80s and the 70s, and it wasn't going anywhere for them. It was horrible. Then Jon Favreau comes on board with Marvel in 2008. Does a movie called Iron Man. Hopefully you've heard of it, with RDJ after, sort of reviving his career after it seemed like it was going nowhere. But they come in, that first Iron Man movie, a very low budget, like a college movie, like an indie style movie budget, knock it out of the park. And after that, you had, the first phase was okay, at least talking about the actual phase, not the metaphorical phase, but the first few phases of Marvel were fairly good, a little bumpy. But I think things going to really start to turn around with not only the first Captain America movie, which came out in 2011, but the first Avengers movie. And that really sort of told you for the first time that a major studio could pull off a major a major comic book movie franchise and a shared universe and interconnecting things, and actually using even obscure characters like the Guardians of the Galaxy, who outside of, John Schnepp, rest in peace. Man, I really wish I could have met him. So I just can't believe he actually died all those years ago. But, the Guardians of the Galaxy, like the only guy in even the comic world who even knew who they were was a guy named John Schnepp on Collider. Like, that's how niche the Guardians were even before the movie came out with James Gunn. But, just hits like that and Winter Soldier. I remember seeing that when I was in Alabama, and that weekend I saw it was right before a pretty significant tornado outbreak. And it was the April 28th, 2014, not April 27th, this a couple years after. It was that weekend, it was that Friday before, and that's kind of interesting how I was, so worried about that outbreak, and, I was watching the James Spann videos, and as a weather enthusiast, you often do that, especially living in the state when I did. But, went to that movie with my dad. We went there that Friday. Kind of helped because I was able to take my mind off of it. But anyway, off that little side story, then you move into, Winter Soldier, Civil War, Endgame, Infinity War, sort of everything just kind of, you kept on getting win after win after win, and success, and it's like almost like, the story of Key Midas, like everything Kevin Feige touched, turned to gold. Same with Dabo Swinney and Clemson. They were just, everything they touched turned to gold. They were, winning national championship, or getting to the national championship, or making the playoff and winning the ACC, and nobody was competing with you. At that time, when Marvel was reaching their peak, there was no real competitors, right? The Fox X-Men movies were going down the drain. Sony Spider-Man just that they kind of gave up on that a little bit, though they still did stuff like with Venom and Spider-Verse and well, now where they are now. Then you also have WB and Warner Brothers and DC with Zack Snyder. That whole DC universe never got off the ground, and it crashed spectacularly a couple years after. We went to the a couple years ago with the Flash movie, but there's no competition for Marvel at that point. They were the dominant force in the pop culture and the superhero market. Like at that point, Star Wars is starting to fall apart with The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. Now, of course, you have like the Mandalorian and Filoni stuff, which is kind of keeping on life support. But even Star Wars at that point, I think Marvel at that point surpassing them. Even as a Star Wars fan, I'll have to admit it, they kind of surpassed Marvel pretty quickly. As will turn out years later, as we're looking back on it, they kind of did. So, yeah, that happened, and there was just no competition. Sort of like Clemson, the ACC, for a long time, there was no competitor. Like, Florida State was down, Miami down, Virginia Tech, nowhere. Right? They were going nowhere fast. Even under Justin Fuente, their first year was good, and then it just got worse. So, as I'm trying to tell you is that Clemson and the MCU right now, very similar. Because after you cross the threshold into the current decade we're in right now, in the 2020s, very similar. Both have stumbled out of the gate. Clemson, it's not good enough. Quarterback play has been horrible. Dabo's made really poor coaching hirings or promotions. Seems like he's changing that a little bit and now using the portal. But then you go over to Marvel, it's like now you're no longer an underdog. No one's doubting you now. And it just seems like with Marvel right now, the problem I think I have, the overarching problem, it's just the mentality's changed. The recipe has changed. You're no longer the underdog anymore. And it felt like with Deadpool and Wolverine last year, it just seems like maybe they were getting back to that, underdog rule, the underdog mentality. It's us against the world. We're the ones being doubted, and everyone's doubting us now, and they think we're trash and crashed and burned out. And then the movie comes out, it's fairly decent. It makes a lot of money, highest grossing A-rated R movie, surpassing the Joker 2019. But then you have this movie, Captain America: Brave New World, where it's just like now we're going back to the Marvels again, and Ant-Man: Quantumania. Look, I have not seen the movie, but based on what I have heard and what it seems like from the movie, and some of the guys, some of the scoopers on Twitter, like I believe it was either Daniel Rickman or Charles Murphy, who originally reported on the character of Amadeus Cho. He was related to the Hulk character who was supposedly going to be in this movie. They already casted him, which was also in the Reddit leak. That's not in the movie. I'll just be honest with you. That's not in the movie. That is not in the movie, from what I can tell. And I think either one of those two confirmed it on Twitter yesterday. They were just like, yeah, it's not in the movie. It got cut. A lot of things I'm sure got cut in this movie during the reshoots. A lot of it was probably pretty decently good. I'm also pretty sure there's a lot of Red Hulk stuff that also got removed. Because again, it sounds like he's barely in the movie. It's mostly just Harrison Ford as President Ross. And he's only Red Hulk for 10 minutes probably, which is fine. That's understandable. It's like it's not a Hulk movie, so it makes sense as it's a Captain America movie. But from a general audience standpoint, it's like, man, your marketing's pretty misleading here. So look, I know it looks bad right now. I know it's terrible. The Rotten Tomatoes score doesn't look good. Now, look, I haven't seen the movie. I haven't. I know Josh, if I didn't have Married to was on earlier, he's seen it right now, so we'll get his reaction here. I think pretty soon. Actually, I think it may be already out. I haven't checked Twitter yet, but I just hope, man, that it's not disaster. Or people are saying it is, at least critics wise. Again, I've seen the reviews from guys like Eric Voss over at New Rock Stars and Ryan Airy at Screen Crush. Like, they're not their point of view, and I value those guys very much. Even sound like John Roca and Christian Hoff. It's like their thoughts in this movie. It's like it's fairly good, and it's like I just kind of get confused as like why the critic ratings are so poor, whereas the true Marvel nerds and stuff, the guys who do the videos and the breakdowns and stuff, you're like, it's not as bad. Like, it's not worth a 51% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So, look, I'll go see it. I'll get my thoughts on it, but I'll also be watching Josh at Dennis reaction to this later. If he doesn't like it, man, me and his opinions are very similar in a lot of ways. And, man, if it's anything like Quantumania or anything like, Thor: Love and Thunder or the Marvels, even some of the worst movies that were run, or hell, even Secret Invasion, man, it's gonna be tough. And look, I'm still looking forward to the stuff in the future, like Doomsday, Thunderbolts coming out, which is looking more and more, even more on my radar as a movie I'm really getting excited for. We also have Fantastic Four, but it's just another thing too. And before we leave this subject here, because the show's been going for Let me go for well over an hour. The fact, and this is one of the things that really bothered me throughout this whole marketing process and getting the movie promoted. They keep saying this, and Ken Feige keeps saying this too. It's like, oh, man, we're getting the Winter Soldier vibes in this movie. Okay, that's great. Again, I love Winter Soldier. That's one of my favorite Marvel movies. But you said that about Secret Invasion. But you said that about Falcon Winter Soldier, the TV show. This is sort of, as Eric Voss said, it's basically like a season finale for, which doesn't sound good to me because I then was not really over the moon about that show. But the fact you keep on saying, oh, it's got Winter Soldier vibes, and they were going back to the political theater, that's great. But you said that about Secret Invasion. You said that about Falcon Winter Soldier, and both of those TV shows are crap. And that's the same thing for this too. It seems like it's garbage. You're according to some of the reviews, and another one I like too is Jeremy Johns. He's been around for a long time. I've always liked him. He even said as much too. It's like a zombified version of Winter Soldier. It's like a Winter Soldier, but at home. Again, I just hope that, and I also agree with Dennis Dodd here, Josh over there at his channel. Again, look, if you want full coverage of the movie and stuff and the spoilers, and not just for this movie, but for stuff in the future, like full-time coverage for that. Of course, our show is mostly cultural, but dives into the Marvel and Star Wars news. Go to his channel, but he'll have his reaction later. But I also agree with him, and I just to calm us down a little bit here, and ending on a little bit of a high note or a more hopeful note. This movie was made during the sort of early 2020s thinking of Marvel, where it's we can make any movie we want from any character, and sort of using the Guardians as like a model here. Even though I agree with Josh over at Nerds that the Guardians movies in general were a false positive. It was a false sense of security because they just seemed to look at Guardians. They were obscure characters, and John Schnepp was the only one who knew what those characters were. Oh, we can do any character. Oh, Kate Bishop, yeah, we'll do her. Yeah, Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, yeah, we'll do her too. Yeah, Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson in Captain America. Now we'll do him. Nothing against those actors or those characters, but they're not. You don't have a bunch of James Gunns running around who can make those characters work. I think you saw that. To a certain extent, what James, did with Suicide Squad, his first movie back in, doing major comic movies. Like you can't have saw even with these characters for that separate movie studio, but it's like there's only one James Gunn, and now he's off at DC now. You can't just assume taking obscure characters, making them to bigger than what they were. That's not going to work every single time. And I feel like Marvel and this movie is a symptom of that. And I think, like Josh over there Nerd said, I think it's another early Marvel 2020 slop that we're just going to have to get through. And movies like Thunderbolts, which kind of fits in that category, but they started filming a lot later. Like it took forever for them to get that movie started. And it was originally going to be a Black Widow sequel movie, which is why you have all those characters in the movie. Like half of the cast is from that movie, which I think that movie's underrated, by the way. But again, this movie is just another early Marvel or early 2020s Marvel slop we just had to get through, and unfortunately, it's probably going to suck. Worst case scenario, it sucks. Now, best case scenario, it's a little better than the critic rating. It's in line with what Ryan Airy's been saying, what Eric Voss has been saying, and even what John Rogan's been saying. It's not as bad as they've been some of these rumors and stuff and reporting from Jeff Snyder has been telling you, but I trust Jeff Snyder. I think everything we're hearing from the critics, even some of the positive reviews, even some of the negative ones from guys like, some of these big figures in the industry and the social media side, even they have been pretty critical and even acknowledged that, yeah, you can notice there's a lot of reshoots and it's pretty flat. And it seems like a lot of stuff was cut out in the movie. And then you have guys, some of the leakers and the scripters on Twitter saying that, yeah, some of these characters like Amadeus Cho, who was rumored to be in the movie and was actually cast, not in the movie. Turns out was either cut very early on or just didn't make it through the casting process, and they didn't shoot anything. So yeah, seems like, and even the post-credit scene too, by the way, and I've seen it leaked on Twitter. I would not recommend staying for the credits. It's kind of a nothing burger. It sounded a lot cooler on in the leaks than it actually did on in an actual theater in the actual final product. But hey, at least one of the positives here, and I guess one on this, even I just said that a few minutes ago, that hey, at least it's a pseudo Edward Norton Hulk sequel, and I actually like that movie. That's another underrated movie. But still, that's not good. Doesn't bode well for this being a Captain America movie. If this was a Hulk movie, yeah, cool, but unfortunately, it's not. And tell you what, man, the box office stuff and the audience reactions are really going to tell the story here in terms of what this means for Anthony Mackie's future as a character and him potentially getting more leading roles. And that sucks because I think he's a good actor. But man, this is not. This hurts, man. It really does hurt. It does. But luckily the projects later in this year, movie-wise, now TV-wise, it's I'm rolling my eyes here. I know you guys can't see me, but I'm rolling my eyes here. It's like, Ironheart, again, also coming from that early 2020s thinking here. It's like, okay, we can do any show or any movie with any character, and then we'll eat it. That's number 1, too, so that's a way more slop if you have to. But at least it evens out a little bit. Again, you have Thunderbolts coming. You have Fantastic Four. Hopefully those are better. I think Fantastic Four is probably going to be the one which represents sort of this real tried and true new thing for Marvel that is more in line with what the Russo brothers are doing and what they're doing with Doomsday and Secret Wars. So, yeah, hopefully it's not as bad as people are saying it is, and not as bad as the ratings are and the reviews and some of them, but this hurts, man. This really does hurt, and hopefully it's not as bad as people are saying it is. And look, like I said, I'll be watching Den of Nerds' review on it, and hopefully it's not the Doomsday scenario, quote unquote, that we all believe it is. But that's it for the show. Again, I might do multiple shows next week. We'll see. I'll also be recording some evergreen content as well. So we'll definitely be back on Tuesday. If earlier, I'll let you guys know if there's a surprise stream or not. But yeah, we've been going for a long time here, and I need to get on with the rest of my afternoon here. So until most likely Tuesday, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care. I'll see you on Tuesday. So take care, guys.